In a pivotal moment for global trade, US and Chinese officials have initiated high-stakes negotiations in Geneva aiming to resolve escalating tariff disputes that have plunged both economies into uncertainty. The discussions, which commenced on Saturday and are set to continue, mark the first direct dialogue since the US imposed staggering tariffs on Chinese imports, raising tensions between the world's two largest economies. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is leading the U.S. delegation, which also includes Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, while Chinese Vice Premier Lifeng heads the Chinese side. The location of these talks, a picturesque villa overlooking Lake Geneva, is emblematic of Switzerland's long-standing role as a neutral ground for international negotiations. However, details surrounding the discussions remain closely guarded, with no public statements issued by either party following the lengthy meeting that lasted over 10 hours. The backdrop to these discussions is a tariff regime that has intensified in recent months, with the U.S. raising tariffs on Chinese goods to a staggering 145%, while China retaliated with a 125% levy on American imports. This tit-for-tat exchange has disrupted trade that totaled over $660 billion in the previous year, leading to significant market volatility and economic ramifications on both sides of the Pacific. In an interview prior to the talks, Bessent highlighted the need for de-escalation rather than a comprehensive trade deal, indicating an understanding that the unsustainable tariffs are detrimental to both nations' economic interests. "We have shared interests," Bessent remarked, emphasizing the necessity of finding a middle ground. Meanwhile, President Trump has suggested potential tariff reductions, stating in a recent post that an 80% tariff seems right. Yet nothing concrete has surfaced from these discussions. Experts have expressed skepticism about the likelihood of immediate breakthroughs. Sun Yun, director of the China program at the Stimson Center, commented that while any agreement to de-escalate tariffs would be a positive signal, tangible results are unlikely from this initial round. She stressed that it cannot just be words, suggesting that both parties must commit to actionable steps to alleviate the current trade tensions. The urgency of these discussions is underscored by the adverse effects of the ongoing tariff war. Financial markets have been jittery, reacting to the uncertainty surrounding trade policies, while U.S. businesses and consumers feel the pinch from increased costs. The negotiations are not only crucial for the U.S. and China but also for global economic stability, as many countries rely on the robust trade between these two economies. As the talks unfold, Switzerland's economy is also in the crosshairs, with officials wary of the potential fallout from heightened trade tensions. Swiss President Karin Keller-Sutter articulated the hopes of her nation to facilitate a resolution, noting, "We really hope that this platform we can offer will also lead to a result, because it would be in the interest of, I would say, the world economy and world commerce." Looking ahead, the outcome of these negotiations could set the tone for future trade relations, not just between the U.S. and China but also influence global economic policies. Analysts suggest that while the current discussions may lay the groundwork for a protracted negotiation process, the stakes remain high. The world will be watching closely as both sides navigate the complexities of their economic rivalry, seeking a path that could potentially reshape international trade dynamics in the years to come. In a significant development that could reshape global trade dynamics, U.S. and Chinese officials have resumed high-level discussions aimed at de-escalating the ongoing trade war. The negotiations taking place in Switzerland mark the first formal meeting since the imposition of steep tariffs by the Trump administration in January. With tensions mounting and mutual economic pressures intensifying, both nations are now exploring potential pathways to reduce the tariffs that have crippled trade between the world's two largest economies. The backdrop to these talks is a complicated landscape of retaliatory tariffs that have escalated to unprecedented levels: 145% on Chinese imports and 125% on U.S. exports to China. Initially ignited by U.S. tariffs, this tariff war has turned into a tit-for-tat exchange that has put immense strain on both economies. As the talks commenced, the pressure was palpable, with both sides publicly framing their positions in a manner that avoids the appearance of capitulation. Neither side wants to appear to be backing down, noted Stephen Olson, a senior visiting fellow at Singapore's Aziz Yusof Ishak Institute. The talks are taking place now because both countries have judged that they can move forward without appearing to have caved in to the other side. The timing of the discussions is particularly strategic for China, coinciding with President Xi Jinping's visit to Moscow, where he showcased China's global influence alongside leaders from the global south. As Xi engages with Russia, it sends a clear message that China is not solely reliant on the US for trade, further bolstering its position at the negotiation table. Despite the firm stances from both sides, the economic realities cannot be ignored. Recent data indicates that Chinese factory output has declined, with manufacturing activity reaching its lowest point since December 2023. A survey by Caixin revealed that services activity has also hit a 7-month low. On the US side, the tariffs have led to economic contraction for the first time in 3 years, with industries dependent on Chinese imports expressing severe concerns about supply chain disruptions. "I think China realizes that a deal is better than no deal," commented Bert Hoffman, a professor at the East Asian Institute, suggesting that pragmatism is beginning to dictate the tone of negotiations. As the talks unfolded over 10 hours on Saturday, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Chinese Vice Premier Lifeng engaged in discussions that largely centered on the need for de-escalation rather than a comprehensive trade agreement. The hope is that both nations can agree to scale back their respective tariffs, a move that would not only stabilize their economies but also provide reassurance to global markets. "The sky-high tariffs imposed by both countries last month are not sustainable," Bessent stated, emphasizing the urgency of finding common ground. President Trump has indicated a willingness to lower tariffs, stating that he believes a fair deal is possible. However, the administration still insists that any concessions will require concessions from China first. This ongoing tug-of-war reflects the complex interplay of domestic political pressures and international economic strategies as both nations seek to maintain a favorable position. Looking ahead, experts anticipate that these discussions will primarily serve as a platform for setting an agenda for future negotiations rather than yielding immediate substantive results. Previous negotiations during Trump's first term took nearly 2 years to produce a Phase 1 agreement, which ultimately left many contentious issues unresolved. This time there is speculation about the potential for a Phase 1 deal on steroids, which would address the deeper structural issues at play, such as China's subsidies for key industries and its relationship with Russia. In the immediate term, the world watches closely as US and Chinese officials continue their dialogue, hoping for signs of progress that could alleviate economic uncertainties. However, with systemic frictions embedded in the US-China trade relationship, a swift resolution remains unlikely. As Olson aptly puts it, Geneva will only produce anodyne statements about frank dialogues and the desire to keep talking, suggesting that while the talks are a step forward, the road to a lasting resolution will be long and complicated. The coming days will reveal whether both sides can navigate their competing interests and come away with a framework that addresses the pressing economic challenges facing both nations. The complex landscape of international trade continues to evolve, particularly as the United States and China navigate their contentious relationship. Recent developments have underscored the fragility of this dynamic, with critical implications for global supply chains and national security. As the US grapples with rising tariffs and retaliatory measures from Beijing, the focus has shifted to rare earth minerals, elements essential for a myriad of technologies, including military applications. China's dominance in the rare earth market is undeniable, producing over 90% of the world's rare earth supply. Beijing has leveraged this strategic advantage amidst escalating tensions with Washington. Following President Donald Trump's decision to impose significant tariffs on Chinese goods, China responded with export controls on 7 categories of rare earth elements, including dysprosium and terbium, effective since early April 2025. These controls require special licenses for export, allowing China to regulate shipments and maintain influence over global supply chains. This move has raised alarms within the U.S. defense sector as these elements are crucial for military technology including jet engines and radar systems. The implications of these export restrictions extend beyond mere economic concerns, potentially disrupting U.S. military programs reliant on these materials. Experts warn that the current geopolitical climate exacerbated by tariff wars could jeopardize access to essential resources, increasing operational risks for the Pentagon. The stakes have never been higher, said one defense analyst, highlighting the interconnectedness of trade policies and national security strategies. As the U.S. engages in trade talks with China in Geneva, the rhetoric surrounding tariffs has shifted considerably. Trump has boasted about the leverage provided by U.S. tariffs, claiming that China, with its massive trade surplus with the U.S., has more to lose. However, as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent noted, this belief may underestimate China's resilience and its capacity to endure economic pressure. Beijing has demonstrated a willingness to retaliate with its own tariffs, suggesting that the trade war is far from one-sided. The complexities of this trade dispute are compounded by China's military modernization efforts. A recent report from the U.S. Army outlined how China's military strategy, termed active defense, emphasizes both offensive and defensive capabilities. This strategy aims to deter U.S. forces and protect Chinese interests in the Indo-Pacific region. With over 3 million personnel, the People's Liberation Army (PLA) poses a formidable challenge, particularly in scenarios involving Taiwan, where China enjoys a significant numerical advantage. In light of these developments, analysts highlight the need for a nuanced understanding of the implications of trade policies. As the U.S. imposes tariffs on a wide array of goods, it risks not only economic repercussions for its own industries but also a potential backlash that could further escalate tensions. "This was not very well planned," remarked Zoe Liu from the Council on Foreign Relations, indicating that the administration may have underestimated the complexities of global supply chains and the interdependencies that exist between the two nations, as both countries prepare for further dialogue. The potential for a de-escalation of tariffs offers a glimmer of hope for businesses and consumers alike. However, economic realities suggest that such negotiations will be fraught with challenges. For now, the trade war continues to unfold, with both sides weighing their options in a high-stakes game that could reshape not only their bilateral relationship but also the broader global economic landscape. With military and economic strategies intertwined, the future remains uncertain. As China strengthens its defense ties with nations across Africa and invests in military education, the U.S. must consider its strategic responses carefully. The willingness of both sides to engage in meaningful discussions, balanced with an awareness of the stakes involved, will ultimately determine the trajectory of U.S.-China relations in the coming years.